Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Native Languages Prevention. My name is BC Echohawk. On behalf of the Native Connections team and Contracting Officer Representatives Maureen Madison and Jan Dunbar Cooper, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. We are recording today's webinar and all phone lines will be muted. However, please don't hesitate to use the chat box throughout our session today. And if you'd like to make a comment, you're welcome to raise your hand. During today's presentation, we will have a poll. During that poll, we'd ask you to use the annotate function in Zoom. To do that, you'll hover over your Zoom dashboard. There is a choice called annotate in that dashboard. Once you choose that, you move to the stamp selection, and that will allow you to put your response to the poll using the stamp. You can use any of the little logos there that are available. We will go over this again when we get to that portion of the discussion. But right now, I'm going to move to opening in a good way. Our guest, Patrick Armstrong, will be doing that for us. Patrick?
Good morning, good day, everybody. In our cultural ways, we always start out with a smudge, and I have a smudge going here with my smudge box. I wanted to pay reference to this braid of sweetgrass in our ways of life. This braid of sweetgrass serves as purpose. Right now, it's just a braid of sweetgrass. In our language, you would say sipatsimo. And then when we put the sipatsimo, the sweetgrass, to say a hot coal, or you light it, and then it gives that purpose. And so I wanted to pay reference to that, to give purpose to our gathering here today, our presentation, our chat, to kind of pave the way of Nitsipowas and the language, our indigenous language. And so in regards to paving that way, it's also planting that root to be nurtured by people such as us, facilitators, educators, people of all backgrounds and ethnicities, to really nurture that root and where it needs to really grow from, and so that we have that understanding and that internalization of. And so I'm going to go ahead and put sipatsimo onto this coal here and start us out with a prayer. In our language, in our cultural, my cultural ways, Blackfoot, we always start our ceremonies off with the smudge. And so I'm going to put the sipatsimo on the coal to give it purpose. And so that's to kind of kick everything off. So bear with me, I'm going to say a short prayer in our Blackfoot language. Ayo na tusi, ayo napi na tusi ako kumikisum kisum. Ayo pisuatses, pakse pisuatses, sume manakapi. Kadans kasma kimma tokina, utokina timoy ka kimma bibit. So kapi a kutses, me sami bata pis no gag ka matapiks, nig sukowax. So kapi mi sami bata pis no gag ispomo kina kimma tokina. Espomos naka esksinimats tokix, esksinimats, espomos naka gas and nonix, espomos nitakex, espomos naka dapi wax. Is kuna dapat simoy kaso kapi mi sami bata pis no gag. Espomo kina nakskapi chinstan anoxis chiko. So kapi a kutsis, mi sami bata pis no gag. Mi sami bata pis no gag is kuna dapat simoy ka kimma bibit. Espomo sa matapiks, igaki mai dance stawi bata pio. So kapi mi sami bata pis no gag. So kapi a kutsis, mi sami bata pis no gag. Espomo kina kimato kina. Kamo tan nista watsimani, mi sami bata pis on aksatapi. Again.
Thank you, Patrick. In our Blackfoot ways, I'm also from the same tribe as Patrick, and in our Blackfoot ways, when somebody says a prayer like that, we take our hands and we put them to our heart, and the meaning of that is that I take your good words and your good intentions and your good requests, and I put them in my heart. As he prayed for all of our children and grandchildren, all of our relatives, all the kids there at the school where he works, and things like that. So thank you very much, Pat. We really appreciate your help in helping to open us up in a good way. It really helps to get us grounded and kind of get us focused on why we're here today. And so I just want to introduce myself. I'm going to be one of the facilitators. My name is John Bird. Nistu Anakok Inio Mahkan. Buffalo Runner is my Blackfoot name. And I'm originally from the Blackfeet Reservation in Montana, and I still have a place there, but I live most of the year in Tucson, Arizona. I'm a snowbird. I'm going to change my middle name to Snow. I go to Montana in the summer and I come to Tucson when it gets cold. So I am a grantee technical assistant, and I work with 10 Native Connections communities right now and help them to develop strategic action plans for suicide and substance abuse prevention. And many of them use cultural approaches. And so this is one of the cultural approaches that we're going to look at today, is the use of language as a prevention strategy. So I just want to welcome you all here. I'm coming to you from Tucson, Arizona, and I'm going to throw it over to my co-facilitator and let her introduce herself. Marie?
Ani Saguli Sagwe. Hello, everyone. Kajijololux Niongets Atnawa Niwa Githandalot. Waniota Aga Niwa Gihanjot. So my name is Marie Schuyler Drever. I am a grantee technical assistant. I'm a colleague of John's, and I welcome you all here today. Today, we're going to be going through a discussion and questions to ask our guests to create a conversation around language learning. And we welcome your questions as participants. And when you have those questions, when we get to our presentation, we ask that you either raise your hands or use the chat box. And part of our learning objectives today are about connecting between native language learning and prevention of suicide and substance abuse. We're going to explore common challenges, obstacles in developing native language programs as part of our prevention programming, and to discuss how language programs are part of the healing process for our communities.
We're going to start off, though, with a chat activity. We're just going to ask you to think about these two things, and then write your responses in the chat box. And on my computer, the chat box is down at the chat is at the bottom. There's a bar down there. It says mute, stop video, participants, and then chat. So if you click on the chat icon there, that chat box will open up, and would like you to just record your thoughts and your responses to these two bullet points, these two points. So the first one is, share something that you learned from your culture that you still use today, that helps you manage your feelings and emotions during challenging times. As Pat was mentioning, one of the things that he's taught is to use his smudge and smudge himself off. I like to go out and go for a walk in the mountains or in the desert here in Arizona, and really it really helps me to connect with nature, and it just kind of grounds me. These can be teachings, they can be support from a traditional healer, they can be words in your language. In the Blackfoot language, they always say, "Ikakimat," try your best, don't give up, and the assumption is that times are going to get hard, but don't give up. And so some of those things. And so I'm going to turn it over to Marie, and she's going to read some of the things that you're putting in the chat box.
Yes, so we have from Eric, we have grounding myself. From our colleague Dave Braveheart, burn cedar or sage to smudge myself off. We have another one here that says prayer connecting with nature, prayer again, listening to and singing tribal hymns, to go to the water and wash my face in a cold creek or jump in all the way. And we have meditation and breath work, tree washing, burn cedar, use white cornmeal to make offerings. And would anyone like to share? I don't see any more in the chat there, John.
All right. And if anybody wants to just add something in, you just take yourself off mute. Can we show them how to raise their hand? Do you know how to do that, Marie?
Over at the reactions, where you see the little smiley face on that bottom bar where the chat is, if you go all the way over to the right, you'll see reactions, and you'll see another bar where it says raise hand. So we have two. We have two participants. Do you want to call on them? Can you see them, John?
With their hand up? I can't see it.
Okay, we had Patrick. We had Patrick, one of our presenters, and we have Eric Acosta. Patrick, would you like to go first?
Oh, I was just trying the
Oh, you were trying it out. Okay. Eric, would you like to share? Oh, he was just practicing too. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Well, we have a couple of new ones that were added into the
oh yes,
into
I
the
see.
chat box.
Mm-hmm.
So Mary Horsechief from Cherokee says the Cherokee water ceremony uses prayer, an ancient song, and washing our face in a running creek. This ceremony redirects us to our original purpose and cleanses us. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Mary. Bobby Arthur adds that she burns cedar and uses white cornmeal to make offerings. Okay. So thank you all. Timber MacArthur added one. I'm very new to learning and connecting with my culture and ancestors. So I am just absorbing all the new information and looking forward to everyone's wisdom and teaching. Thank you, Timber. That's exactly what this is for, is we're here to help each other and to share with each other the things that might be useful to others. So thank you.
We have a couple more. Connecting with relatives and beautiful practices is what was shared in the chat.
That's a really great activity to, just to get us in the frame of mind about thinking, about all the richness of our culture and all the things that our cultures give us before we launch into the discussion about language. I just want to read what Dolores Juanico put in here. She says, in Acoma Pueblo, our women make a type of pudding that's traditional at this time, and we share this with our brothers and sisters. So connecting with culture and tradition brought a sense of healing. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Dolores. So we're going to move on, and I'm going to ask the presenters to introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Cree Walshella from Spokane, Washington. Cree, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, why squeeze kriwal shula is an kaluk squeeze machay kush in Lakota squeeze wamni omni wian wachipi kintil in chat lium ul kin limt kin chinhi apnat schalt. Hello everybody, my name is Kriwal Shula. My ancestral Salish name means grizzly bear in the water, and my Lakota name is Whirlwind Woman Dancer. I am from Inchalim, Washington on the Colville Reservation, where I am a first generation descendant and I'm an enrolled Coeur d'Alene tribal member. And I'm super happy to be here today to talk about this very important topic. I am the co-owner of a mother-daughter consulting business called Swan Innovations. So our consulting is primarily around Native education, behavioral health, and then language and cultural revitalization. And I'm also the executive director of a nonprofit called Kuchin Heat, and Kuchin Heat looks to our first language speakers and cultural knowledge keepers to guide us in recreating Indigenous education that our ancestors practiced prior to colonization. So from their wisdom, we create curriculums, educational resources, toolkits, and more to funnel into programs servicing Indigenous youth and with the emphasis on mental health. And so we have a team of educational consultants and behavioral health consultants that assist in pulling together supporting evidence and recommendations to amplify the mental health benefits that's already existing within our language and our culture.
All right. Thank you, Cree, and welcome. We like to balance that. We like to have the gender balance to balance the female voice with the male voice. And so I want to invite Pat Armstrong to introduce himself.
Okay, nestuka na dosisa kumapi. Hinepita na toi samia kino koe kitopini tänäks pitää kipisuatses. Kimuskitse papista kino to. Inenna hänestää atuapinna. Iksestanista täällä leitsukapinaakki. Kiteisin uppää no to. Ninna sin matsta jopa vane chatin in KW Bergen Donio Montana. Hello everybody. My identity, not Dusi Sakumapi, it means sun boy, which was gifted to me many years back as an infant, and I just introduced, told you who my wife was and our three beautiful children. I live in beautiful Heart Butte, Montana, which is south of Browning, Montana there, and I also let you know that I'm a Ninna, and Ninna, what that really primarily means is kind of the role that you take as a male. Some people look at Ninna as a fatherly figure. Other people, especially with role, view a Ninna as a person in leadership roles. And so I told you that I'm a Ninna within the Browning Public Schools, more appropriately an assistant principal of pre-K through first grade students. I also let you know who my father was, Atawapin, which means holy man, Patrick Armstrong Sr., and my late mother who passed in 2018, Sokopinaki, whose name, which means Sheila May Gopher Armstrong, both lived in Browning, or both lived in Browning. And so I'm an enthusiast, I'm a culturalist, I'm a code switcher between two different world paradigms, primarily through the Indigenous ways of life, as my wife and I are heavily involved with our cultural ways, but also an enthusiast with immersion, really grounding in trying to help our students and our youth to identify with themselves and just who they are as Indigenous people, Indigenous persons, or Indigenous individuals. And so again, planting that root of who they are and where they come from and nurturing that background. So thank you all for having me.
We are now going to participate in a poll activity. And at the beginning of our webinar, when we started, we were showing the use of how to use the annotate stamp. It is found in hovering the green area at the top or the bottom of your screen. And if you move to annotate, you're able to select a stamp, please, and you can share the poll questions that are on our screen here, which is, our Native Connections project sponsors ongoing native language learning opportunities for youth. As grantees, this is what we're asking you. Our Native Connections project does not have any native language learning strategies for our youth on our SAP, which is your strategic action plan, or our Native Connection grant is thinking about developing a native language learning strategy for youth. So using your annotate the stamp button, could you please mark as our participants? Again, it's in the view option, annotate, and there's a stamp button. It has a check mark on it. Pick any of those 6 stamps and make a selection. I'm going to use the heart to show you what I'm showing. So our project
I'm gonna use a
sponsors,
star.
you can pick any one of them to go with.
Pick the one that most accurately reflects where your Native Connections project is right now. You know, do you have language strategies going on in your project, or do you not? That would be the middle one. Or maybe you're thinking about it, you're planning one. That would be the third one. So go ahead and put your stamp by the one that best fits where your project is.
Sorry, I can't find the stamp area.
Okay, again, at the top or the bottom of your screen, you'll
Okay.
see a green
Bar.
what are they, toolbar?
Yeah.
And you'll see view options, and you click on view options and you can change different things in there, and it says annotate. Click on the annotate, and then about the 4th one from the left, you'll see stamp, and you can select any 6 of those stamps there to make your poll selection.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So do we want to do, wait, I'm trying to help.
It's okay. It's okay.
You can take your best guess.
Yeah, we could even help you with it.
Yeah. So I'd just like to say something about this while you all are selecting your option in the poll that we asked. When I'm the lead on this webinar, I was assigned the lead. And so when I started planning, and the first thing I did was recruited Marie and BC to help me, and Tony, the tech guy, who's in the background there. But I sent out an email to all of the GTAs, all of my colleagues that work with all of the Native Connections projects that we work with. And I asked them if any of them thought that they had a Native Connections project that had native language learning as a strategy in their SAP, and they were doing a really good job of that. And, you know, that they wanted to come on to this webinar and talk about that. And the responses that I got back were that, you know, some of them had, you know, or some of them were thinking about it, but none of them felt like they had language strategies, and that they were doing language strategies to the point where they wanted to come and talk about them on a webinar. So I just wanted to mention that, you know, and so I just wanted to help make you aware of that. And I'm glad to see that, you know, some of you are clicking the one that says, yeah, we have some native language opportunities for youth. Our Native Connections program sponsors those. Yeah. And some of you are saying, no, we don't quite have that. And some of you are saying, yeah, we're thinking about it. We're planning it. So maybe at the end of this webinar, we might have more SAPs that start showing up with language learning strategies on them. So I just wanted to mention that. Thanks, Marie.
Yes, thank you. It looks like we have a good mix of all 3, and it looks like we have some outliers. as our data would all show, right? Anybody that does research, we see those outliers. But thank you everyone for participating. There was 2 individuals that said they're on their mobile and weren't able to participate in the annotate. So I did their selections for them.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on, huh, BC?
Oh, thank you for clearing that for me. It's just getting up there.
You know, we have a lot of pictures dispersed throughout this slide, and the pictures that we've seen thus far have been mostly from Patrick's program at the Browning Public Schools. And these pictures on this page are from Cree's work that she does with youth. So I'm going to let her just speak briefly about these pictures.
Yeah, so these are some cultural camps. You'll see here that we had a workshop on like with horses and dog baying and dip net making and hide tanning. And so one thing that in our work, our land-based cultural practices and are basically inextricable from our language. And so it's really important for us to do language revitalization work on the land and doing our cultural practices. And that's where, you know, a lot of research supports that land-based intervention as well. And so that's what we heavily focus on, is just going back to the land and reclaiming our traditional practices.
Thank you, Cree. Classrooms are great when it's 20 below zero, but you know, when it gets warm, we all want to be outside and doing those activities outside that, you know, that we all love. So thank you. So we're going to start the panel. So this is how it's going to work. Patrick and Cree are going to be our subject matter experts. So they're our panel, and we're going to ask them these questions. So the questions are, in what ways does native language learning strengthen Native youth? What are the benefits of Native youth learning their language? You know, 2 versions of kind of the same question. And then the third one is that this photo depicts a Blackfoot naming ceremony. That's Patrick there doing some of the work there at the school where he works. In what ways is language intertwined with other cultural strategies? And so I know about this picture. They did a naming ceremony at the school for kids. And so, you know, and that involves mostly the language. But let's go back and we'll start with this first question. And I want to remind the participants that if you have a response to this question, you can write that response in the chat box. And then after Patrick and Cree weigh in, we'll read your responses as well. So please feel free to respond in the chat box. If you want to respond verbally, just raise your hand and we'll call on you after Patrick and Cree have answered this question. So I'm going to pose the first question and we'll start with Cree. So Cree, in what ways does native language learning strengthen youth?
Thank you, John. So this is probably going to be my longest response, so don't worry, I won't talk this long for the other questions. But first, I'd like to provide just a little bit of context and talk about resilience. So resilience, you know, it's essentially having positive outcomes in spite of hardships and adversity. And I'm sure you all, you know, being in this work, understand this very well. But there are 4 primary factors of resilience, and those are relationships, culture or spiritual connection, self-efficacy and autonomy, and then last, self-regulatory and adaptive skills. So of course, I don't have to explain how language is connected to culture and spirituality, but I wanted to start with relationships. So our languages, any language, reflects cultural values. And for a lot of Indigenous cultures, relationships are very important. And so in my Okanagan Salish language, the word for family, for example, is Snaqsiluch, which means one body. In the Coeur d'Alene language, which is where I'm enrolled, the word for father, which is Pipet, means generous and generosity. And so in a more Eurocentric lens, a father is typically viewed as the disciplinarian and the authority, versus a Coeur d'Alene perspective you see in our language, it has to do with generosity. So our languages shapes and wires the brain to connect with one another on a deeper collective level. And we are collective cultures. So there was actually a study around Eastern Asians and Western Europeans, and they hooked them up to like these brain imaging machines. And then they told each of these participants that their mothers were liars. And so the East Asians, actually their brains responded as if you were calling them a liar, but the Europeans responded as if you were calling someone else a liar. And that was demonstrated on like how culture and language can actually influence thought and wire and shape the whole neural infrastructure. And so in our languages, they're heavily reflective of our culture. So having deep, meaningful relationships is part of that. And it can actually change like our neurobiology and how we connect to and relate to other human beings. So then next, there's self-regulatory and adaptive skills, which is basically executive function. So this part of the brain gets really damaged by trauma, which, by the way, Native children have the highest ACEs scores when disseminated by race, and they also experience PTSD at the same rate as combat veterans coming back from the Middle East. So this is very important to help kind of heal this part of the brain. And so in learning a language, this strengthens this part of the brain because part of this function involves utilizing working memory and code switching. So executive functioning, memory, working memory, cognitive flexibility, and inhibitory control, which is very important. When you're thinking about suicide and suicide prevention, a lot of people talk about some suicides are accidents because they're just on that brink of, maybe they won't pull the trigger, maybe they will, or whatever it is that they decide to end their life. And it's just that little bit of executive functioning and inhibition that you need to say, nope, I need to, what am I doing? And to not go through with that. And so it's a really important part of the brain to have, functioning well. And so in speaking one language, you have to turn the other off and you have to code switch. So this is actually like physical therapy for the brain. And the neural infrastructure is really similar to a town's infrastructure. So there are metaphorical hospitals, schools, libraries, grocery stores, gas stations, etc. So when you learn multiple languages, you're building a healthier infrastructure and you have more resources to tap into in order to emotionally cope with whatever you're going through. So it's also not just the executive function center that is strengthened, it really is the entire neural infrastructure. So not only does the brain have more resources, but diverse resources. So that's the difference between like maybe a rural town and a larger city, right? So in addition to that, there are various studies that demonstrate that children who learn their languages have higher levels of self-efficacy, which is a resilience factor. And it can also give children higher levels of self-esteem, which is also really important. So I always tell people the public school system is a cultural experience, and it is grounded in American culture, which is essentially a Eurocentric capitalist culture. And this is the place where children go to learn everything that they need to know to succeed in life. So when there's a strong linguistic and cultural representation, it elevates the value of their people, and that boosts their collective self-esteem as an Indigenous person. And then they inherit that self-esteem for themselves. So when that representation on the other end is lacking, the results are often insecurity and lack of engagement. Also, stability can come from being part of a larger cultural unit. And by speaking your language, you deepen that identity, that feeling of belonging. It also deepens the connection to land. So in my culture, the land and animals gave us our language, and we identify ourselves by our land base. So for example, the bands that I come from on the Kawa tribe are the Sinaisk, which is the people of the Dali Barden, the Shueich, which is the people of the sharp pointed trees, the Shintiatku, the people of the grass and the water, the Sinpawilch, people of the gray mist, and then Shinpashkaushuk, which is the people of the in-between, like a valley. And our identity comes from the land. And by knowing and speaking the language, it also deepens our connection to the land, which then expands our sense of community and place. So there's a lot of research right now coming out around place-based attachment, and that we can actually bond to land bases the same way that you can bond to your own mother. And so I'm sure a lot of you can relate to the loss and grief of losing maybe like a childhood home or a piece of land that's no longer accessible to you that you grew up close to. But bonding and having relationships with the land has similar benefits to having relationships with people. And so by speaking your language, and it comes from that, it really just like deepens those roots and connects you to the land. So to recap all of that, being authentically connected to language contributes to really each resilience factor, and it can strengthen people neurobiologically, epigenetically, spiritually, and physically. And that concludes my response to that question.
All right, thank you, Cree. I'm going to ask Patrick to give his response to that question.
Well, in the classroom setting that I was involved heavily was with the immersion programs within Browning Public Schools. And a lot of the piece that I really hit on was identity. And with that identity factor, it really brought about a sense of confidence, you know. And so I also had to play that role of being, you know, that, how would you say, guru of language and whatnot, and being that facilitator, being that teacher. But most importantly, being that Nina, as I referred back to that fatherly figure and whatnot. And so being able to identify with the students, the language factor and how to utilize the language was a journey in itself that is still being depicted into, you know, curriculum. And so one of the main things that, you know, I really worked around was our administration. I didn't bully or anything like that, or push my weight around or anything like that. But I utilized that sense of them not knowing and understanding, you know, cultural language and whatnot. And so there's still a traumatic piece that happens where, you know, fear steps in, where our administration says, well, you know, you can't teach that. Why not? You know, and a piece that I'm talking about is religion, you know. Well, that's what they say is religion. And then I fire back and I say, well, culture, that's what I'm teaching. It just so happens that religion is a big part of that culture. I'm not trying to teach, you know, the students how to pray. I'm not trying to teach them how to you know, just be a part of religion. It's not about that. It just so happens that with that culture piece, there's a lot of ethics, there's a lot of value, there's a lot of moral value within those, within that way of life. And so being able to get around that with the administration, you know, because they didn't know, it really worked wonders for me. And primarily I was able to do, you know, pretty much what I wanted to do, you know, so I took advantage of that. And so I incorporated a lot of place-based learning. I incorporated a lot of infusion of the Western world. I wanted to make it apparent and known that I was teaching from a Blackfoot's perspective, you know. And so I was infusing it. It's sort of say, you have your Bikani Bata piece, you know, your Blackfoot ways of knowing your life, me Sami Bata piece, you know. And then you're teaching that. You're teaching all the moral ethics, the back end, the principles, everything like that you need to plant seed inside those children of identity, you know, knowing identity. And then you're sprinkling, you know, the Western worldview on top of that. And so being able to teach from the source, not from books, not from computers, not from the internet or anything like that, but really heavily involving the students with place-based learning activities and what's not. And some of the pictures depict that you have seen already with some of my students and teaching them how to pick sweetgrass. And in return, those students went and taught their parents how to teach or to pick sweetgrass. You know, they were properly shown how to give thanks and place tobacco down to give thanks to that sweetgrass. And so being able to get heavily involved with that place-based learning, it really brings back to life the spirit that is needed for language to thrive. If we teach the language with phonetics and stuff like that, it's a good ground piece. I have a Blackfoot dictionary here that I utilize, you know, quite a bit and whatnot, but you know, it's only to utilize phonetically to sound out words and whatnot and give reference to, right? Now, there's no spirit behind these words that are listed, you know, written down. And so if I was to teach, you know, write down each word on the board and whatnot and have my students memorize each one of those words, I'm not teaching the spirit of that word. And so one word that I can think of is ponogamita, which means horse in our language. Well, being that our language is a very descriptive language, it's describing elk dog, ponogamita. And so ponoga is elk, and a horse was big like an elk, but he was also smart like a dog. And so there's a deeper connection. There's a deeper teaching behind ponogamita. Now, the reason why we call him elk dog was because the horse came at a time that we really needed him. We were getting away from the dog days and whatnot when we used to utilize the dog pretty much for everything that we did every day primarily. And so with the word ponogamita, it was a sense of respect for the horse and the gift that it presented and gave to our people. And so there's a deeper connection behind that word that I taught to my students. And so that's where you're given that spirit, you're giving it life. And so by teaching the language, we always have to know we have to give life to our language. It's not a dead language. Everything has purpose, everything has meaning. And so being able to incorporate that into the daily classroom, you know, and really being heavily inclusive with the cultural ways, that's where you're going to see your successes build. It's going to be minimal at first, but then after in time, you're going to start knowing and seeing the benefits of it. And it's going to spread like wildfire. And so I get back to identity. And that wildfire, you know, being with my students and them wanting to know more and more and more. Mr. Armstrong, tell me a story. Mr. Armstrong, can you take me to Gnosis, Agoka, you know, to any ceremony like that? Can you help me? Can you help me to understand this? And so that's where the questions start coming about. That's where the curiosity of our young people come about. So that's where we get that success from. We need to build from that.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Cree. I just want to read some of the things that were said in the chat box. Marty Richardson says language is used the most in song on the East Coast. Youth around here have learned how to introduce themselves in the language, which gives them confidence. It also helps them feel worthy as a Native person. So I love that. Roberta Sillyboy is responding to what Cree was saying about that sense of connection to place, connection to the land. And she said, I really feel that sense that she was talking about. And I get incredibly anxious anytime I leave that place where I'm kind of rooted. And I feel like I'm back home when I come back. And I hear a lot of people talk about that. I hear the Blackfoot people say, when I see Chief Mountain, I know I'm home. Or the Tohono people out here where I live, you know, they have a mountain called Babakiveri, and they say, when I see Babakiveri, I know I'm close to home. And the Navajos, they say, when I get back within the 4 sacred mountains, you know, I feel safe again. So that connection to place that's reflected through our languages is really, really powerful. And then you can take a look in the chat box, you know, just click on that. But people are just Marty Richardson asked people to put in a word in their language and what it means. And so there's quite a few of those that are in there. I won't read them all off. So you can go ahead and take a look at those. Beautiful, beautiful words. So thank you, Cree, and thank you, Patrick. We're going to move on to the second question. It's what are the benefits of what are the benefits of Native youth learning their language? And we've already talked about some of those. If you have anything that you would like to add on to that, Cree, go ahead.
Absolutely. And before I do that, I also kind of wanted to touch on those comments as well, and how our language is in a lot of our cultural songs, and singing together actually produces the hormone oxytocin, which promotes bonding and trust as well. So that's another kind of layer to it, right? We have a lot of our language, we use a lot of singing too in our language revitalization efforts. So there's actually a lot of hormones that can help ease stress, help connect and build those relationships to other people. So that's really important as well. And the comment about the feeling worthy, like that's huge. Like that is so important. Like just having that sense of worthiness, especially around this work in substance abuse and suicide prevention, like that is so impactful for people just to have that feeling of being worthy, right? So I just wanted to kind of piggyback on those comments as well. And I used to have to travel a lot for ANA, so I also connect with that feeling, that at home, I'm home feeling when I start to see trees after I've been to Oklahoma or something. I'm like, oh, trees, yay. So, okay, the second question, in that first question, we talked about how language strengthens youth. And it really, what it comes down to is building resilience in mental health. And mental health really is the cornerstone of a healthy and abundant life. So starting with sorry, I have to address that quick comment. Yes, there is trees in Oklahoma, in Washington State. It's just a different level. It's like fur up here with our trees. So starting with education, studies show that mental health issues are linked to poor educational outcomes, and mental health is a predictor of educational achievement. Studies also show that Native children who learn their language have significantly higher educational outcomes, in particular in immersion education. But then there's also physical health. So there's a lot of research around epigenetics and how ancestral and personal trauma can lead to physical health issues through epigenetic modification. And cortisol weakens the immune system. So kind of going back to that first question and talking about the ACEs rates of Native children and the PTSD rates of Native children, a lot of our children are struggling with high levels of cortisol, and so that's weakening the immune system. And then exposure to all that stress can actually modify DNA methylation, which may alter gene expression and therefore contribute to disease phenotype. So I actually was diagnosed with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease in my mid-20s, and that is really all about epigenetic inheritance. There was also studies around residential school survivors, and these studies happened up in Canada. And so they said that for Native people, if you had one generation of your family attend residential school, that increased your risk for lifetime suicide ideation. If you had two generations of family attend, it increased it even more. And then for my own family, I had 3 generations attend residential school on one side, and then I had some on my other side. So I think a lot of that kind of is what manifested my kind of insulin resistance issues and fatty liver issues. So early life stress, such as childhood abuse and stress-related disorders, have lasting effects on methylation that may persist into adulthood. So since language contributes to resilience and is shown to reduce stress, anxiety, depression, and generally improve sense of well-being, it can have a lot of physical health benefits. And the earlier you can implement these, the better, right? So we want to see pregnant women, we want to see babies, we want to see little guys, starting from the womb is really when you want to start to implement these types of things. So it's a domino effect. Language and inherently culture, right? You can't really separate the two. It improves mental health. And then that leads to good mental health, facilitating a mental state conducive to learning and engaging in educational activities. And then those positive educational outcomes from that then open up the doors for socioeconomic stability. And then socioeconomic stability contributes to quality of life, right? So it's like, it's literally, if from the gate, from the beginning of life, if you're struggling with mental health issues, all these doors shut behind it, right? But if we start in early and really understand that language and culture is so instrumental in building resilience, it's just dominoes for the rest of their life and contributing to that quality of life. So then other studies also connect language continuity to lower levels of domestic violence, substance abuse, cigarette smoking, diabetes, suicide. So it benefits every aspect of life that Native youth in their childhood and for their whole entire lives. And that's what's really important to understand, is like in childhood, you can actually positively contribute to epigenetic healing. So relationships is a huge one. You can actually build stress receptors in children and that will impact them for the rest of their life. Or if you can work on executive functioning, building that executive functioning in children, that impacts them for the rest of their life. Now, it's not just in that moment. It's not just, until they go into the next grade. If you are intentional in those sensitive periods, this is life. Like, you could literally save a life by knowing how to really implement authentic, strong language and cultural programs. And I will bet my life on that, So anyways, I go ahead and end my comment on that question and pass it back over.
Thank you, Cree. Patrick, you want to answer that question?
Sure. So benefits of youth and students learning language, I strongly feel identity. It creates a sense of purpose and a sense of confidence. Little data from my past of teaching. My wife and I, 2 years ago, when I taught at Napi Elementary, I taught 5th grade and she taught 4th grade. Well, we both taught the Immersion Program at Napi Elementary in Browning. And the WIDA test, which measures ELA, early language learners, ELL, everything that it measures is strictly, based around the English language and how we comprehend, right? And so this test, this assessment is given to our students at Browning Public Schools, which is regulated by OPI, Office of Public Instruction. And so our students will, they can test out of this WIDA test. And that year, my wife and I's classrooms had the only students in the school building that had students test out of this program. And we had teachers and administrators coming to us, even OPI people coming to us and asking us, well, how did you do this? How did you accomplish this? And I got to admit, at that point, I didn't have a clear answer, that I could give them. And they just, pretty much related everything from our immersion program. Now, getting back to Napi Elementary, it was 3 grades at that time, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. And I believe there's at least almost 500 students in our school. And out of all 3 grades, there's 9 classrooms at each grade level. And again, my wife and I's classrooms were the only classrooms that had students test out of this WIDA program. And so I had an aha moment a few months ago when a colleague came to me to read her letter that she wrote to graduate school. And so one of the points that she made in her letter was building confidence in our students and helping them to be confident in today's world. And so it kind of gave me an aha moment, and I started thinking, what we did, what my wife and I provided for our students at that time was we created identity with purpose. We were able to teach from an Indigenous perspective, and it helped our students to comprehend Western worldview or Western pedagogy, Western education curriculum at a level where, you know, they understood the literature, they understood the educational curriculum at a sense that made sense to them. Everything was being taught from our perspective, you know, Native Indigenous perspective, rather than having an Apikwan, you know, a white person or somebody that's, you know, not associated, that's not Indigenous or part of that community, teach our children this. You know, don't get me wrong, there's those excellent teachers that really do know how to utilize their skills to teach in order to really reach their students. But there's also those teachers that don't know how to teach Native American students. And so we eliminated all that Western worldview, and we taught from an Indigenous perspective, and we created that identity with purpose. And so it set that confidence. And so from that point on, we started seeing success in data and whatnot. And this year, being my first year as an assistant principal, we were going over data in one of our meetings, and in that meeting, our academic coach stated, you know, all these students that you see here that are in the blue, you know, they're testing out this program, or their marks are really high, but these are all students that are involved with our immersion programs. So there's a key there that we are touching on right now. And right now, that key, that element, I should say, is identity. It's confidence, building our students. And that's what we need in order to assure the survival of our languages, to assure the survival of identity. And so that's just kind of a roundabout way of how, you know, our students, some of the benefits that they are witnessing, you know, and that's coming from my perspective, you know, and the benefits kind of, they go out further than that. You know, they're teaching their parents or teaching the community words and sentences and phrases and whatnot. And so it really makes them feel good to hear people telling them, really, you know that, you know, good job, Sagapi, good. And so that's one of the things that we need right there, is confidence in our students.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the third question. In the PowerPoint, there's a picture of, it's Patrick, and he's giving a name. I'm familiar with this ceremony. It's a Blackfoot naming ceremony. But the question is, in what ways is language intertwined with other cultural strategies? And people have kind of touched on that and talked about it. So I'm going to ask, I'm going to start with Patrick this time and go the other way. Patrick, you want to say something about that?
Sure. Kind of give background to that picture. The most powerful ceremony that we have, that we can provide for our children, is the naming ceremony. And that naming ceremony, it's how we are recognized in that other world. So when we pass, you know, before 1492, we never knew heaven or hell. We never knew of Christianity or the Bible or anything like that. And so that's kind of a big aha moment. And so being able to, you know, really utilize and believe in that background, that belief of, you know, we didn't know that. Well, we know that there's another world out there, you know. And so when we pass, you know, everything that we do in this lifetime and everything that we do here, the scars that we get, we learn from that, and it makes us better into that next world. And so in that next world, it's said to believe that we are known by the name given through ceremonies such as this right here. And so the language that's involved, you know, whenever we are asked to pray or anything like that, you know, as for me and my wife, in our bundle ways of life, we always ask, Zaki Taniko, what is your true name? My true name, Natusi Sahumapi. That's how everybody relates to me at our ceremonies. And so when I pass, that's how I'm going to be known in that other world. And so they're not going to know me as Pat Armstrong. That's just a name that's on my identification cards, my IDs, my school badge, my driver's license and whatnot. And so my true identity, my true name, Natusi Sahkumapi, the benefits behind that of knowing Natusi Sahkumapi is the deeper connection of what that name really actually means. And so there's a special meaning behind that name for me. In that name, when we give names, we give that background meaning. We also set them out into the world, sort of say, with success stories, coup stories and whatnot. And so all the luck that we get from those, from our past experiences, we give them to those individuals that we name and whatnot. And so the benefits behind our language and all of that really puts the resilience factors within and lets those students know that, hey, I'm Blackfoot and I'm proud of it. Hey, I'm Chippewa Cree. Hey, I'm, Cherokee, and it just sets that confidence where they just know who they are and it makes them proud of who they are.
Thank you, Patrick. Cree?
Yeah, so again, I'm going to start off with a little bit of context. So monolingual English speakers tend to see language learning as kind of like translation. So for example, how do I say good morning in the language type of a strategy? And I don't say that as out of any kind of judgment or criticism, just observation from my own experience. And I grew up speaking Okanagan Salish, we call it Insilchin or Nkailuchin, and I'm also a pretty proficient understander of other Southern Interior Salish languages. And Salish is actually the language that keeps linguists from coming up with what's called the universality of languages, which is basically finding the linguistic functions that can apply to all the languages in the world. And the reason why Salish kind of stands in the way of that is because the notions of noun and verb, as well as other traditional parts of speech, are not relevant in Salish. So an example is a full moon is Yerenchut, and it literally means it rounded itself. But I could say something like Atsunti Yerenchut, which is look at the full moon, but I'm talking about it as if it's a noun, but the word functions as a verb, it's an action. And so this means, my language in particular, and I know a lot of other Indigenous languages are heavily verb-based. So this means that in languages are reflective of your reality, right, as a culture. And so what this means is that our reality is that of a living world and an environment. So in contrast with English, English is actually a noun-based colonial language, and English allows the speaker to view the environment as objects and things. And so it's easy to exploit, use, control objects and things. And it's harder to do that from our language when you see and interact in this world as if everything's alive and living and interacting with you. I was actually kind of thinking about the comment that I made about how our trees are like fur up here. And then I just realized in our language, our word for forest literally means whoop is to be furry. And then ulauch is the land. And so you can say supulauch is the land, and it literally means earth's fur. And so it just totally changes how you view the world, how you interact with it. It's so much more funny. I always tell people when I code switch right from English to Salish, it reminds me of that movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit, when you're going from the really mundane real world and then you step into a cartoon world. That's really what it's like, to speak my language anyways, and how I feel, and you just see things so differently. So I say all that to say that really language is the culture. It's an expression of the culture. Our worldviews, our values, our beliefs have shaped it over thousands of years. And in my culture in particular, I think I already mentioned this, that we believe that the land and the animals gave us our sounds. And these things are just so inextricable And so I'm grateful to know my language because I don't know how deep my connection to my culture would be without it. And it's tailored to, our languages are tailored to our culture. So for example, we have a word, and it's one word, it's a long word, but it's one word to describe to go throw something into the water, which requires a whole English sentence to describe. And some people, other language people might come up and say, well, of course, Salish is polysynthetic, which means you have all these little pieces and you put them together to make like word sentences. But we also have words like mulkslik, which is two words that is needed to describe a hot dog. So it shows you, like, if you need two or more words in my language, then it shows you it's not congruent with our culture, it's not relevant. But when it's just one language, that means it's like almost like a flag that says this is relevant, to the culture. So there is a certain way, another example, there's a certain way that we work brain solution into a hide. It's also there's the same word is used for kind of breaking down a certain part of the process of breaking down hemp rope from dog bane. And we call that motion ichikstum. And I asked one of my elders one time how he would explain that word in English, because I couldn't think of one, like, because I'm like, this is a specific motion, right? And so he sat there and he paused and he said, well, I guess it's like to grab something with both hands and then the pressure, hands together and shake vigorously. He's and so that's it's fine-tuned, right, to our cultural practices. And some of our practices, you just can't find those words in English. And Salish cultures, I can't speak for all, but mine in particular are really like, we're a river people. And so we have so many words for different things that happen with the water, the way it laps up onto if it's slow or gentle or fast and hard, or how the waves are, or if you're floating on it, and if it's just one person or multiple people, it's just so specific to our culture. And so when you look at these, our words, and you look at the what they're called morphemes, which is the smallest unit of meaning in the word, it really it's like the key to like seeing how our ancestors viewed the world and how we saw one another. And it's hard to really separate the two. I recently got asked a question, and it was a little bit triggering for me, to be honest, but the question was, why is your language the better to use in cultural practices than English? And then I was legitimately tasked with answering this question. And I was like kind of taken aback for a minute. And so the way I had to really think about this, to articulate it in a way that people who are non-native can understand this, right? And so what it comes down to is that languages are like mothers. So if you were to take your mom and another woman who has similar nurturing qualities, same demeanor, who's the best woman to care for you? Like, how would it feel, right, to be asked, why is your mom the best mom for you? Here's this other woman, she's actually has more nurturing qualities than your mom. So why can't let's just swap it out? How can you explain that, right? And so our language is and our culture is basically, you can't separate the two. It's really hard to separate the two. So let's see, what was the question? I feel like I kind of went on a little bit of a rant, but it's just there. And there's also like levels of culture, right? So there's the tangible culture, which is like food, clothing, just things that you can see and manipulate or handle, I guess, physically. But then there's the intangible culture, which is protocols and relationships and all these different things. And our languages are so nuanced and tailored to those practices and those types of cultural things. And it's really hard to, recently, I asked one of my elders, we had gotten on my elders Zoom, which is really cool because I'm far away from them. And, in English, if you were to ask, how you doing? Somebody would be like, oh, I'm good. But when I hopped on, I asked him, "Stimas paus," which means what's in your heart. And you could tell he wasn't, I don't think he expected me to ask him that, because once you ask that, you can't pretend to say I'm good. And he had to tell me what was on his heart. You know what I mean? And he was sad. And so it's totally, it's a whole nother, you know, experience, and it's really hard to explain, you know, unless you've been able to participate in that, and not to say that in a judgy way or anything, but I'll go ahead and stop talking because I'm just kind of rambling a little bit.
Thank you both. This is a wonderful conversation. I'm really enjoying it, but we do have to move along. So I'm going to turn it over to Marie for the next section of the questions.
Thank you, John. So I just wanted to share, to follow up as we were with the other the other two questions, that we have a couple of responses. We have one here that our colleague Marty said awesome. And then Hunter was sharing, yes, an understanding of language changes the view and our perspective of our relationship to our environment and our place in the living. A correlation between the loss of language and increased behavioral health concerns makes sense because of the loss of our understanding of who we are, in parentheses, identity, and etc. So yes, complete understanding. So now we'll move over to some questions here that we have that we'd like for you to participate, whether it be in chat or raising your hand. Again, the reaction button down at the bottom, the very first one on the right, it's a smiley face. You can raise your hand by clicking on that, and it'll bring up the option to raise hand. What are challenges, obstacles in developing and implementing native language programs? And why are there not more language program strategies on the SAPs, which is our strategic action plans with our grantees? And then what works to help overcome obstacles to language programming? And I just wanted to thank both of you, Cree and Patrick, on your responses, and really touched. And, you know, I brought up some different things that I do with my family and what we've done with our children, my husband and I. I don't know if I shared. I always just share my introduction, but I didn't relate that I'm Oneida on my father's side. I was raised Oneida, as my mother's people are Odawa, and my mother's father and mother both were victims of our boarding schools. And my father's side escaped a lot of colonization by moving from New York to Ontario and settling there. And my father's family became tree trimmers because they went in the bush to hide, because my great-grandfather was a residential school survivor of Carlisle. And so just really relating to a lot of what you both shared. And my husband's a Cree, and so he's a fluent Cree speaker, and it's been important for us to implement that in our home. So I really related to a lot of what you all shared, so thank you. So again, if we can have you all that are participating with us today by activating the chat button, or if you would please come off mute by raising your hand, and we'd like to select on you if you'd like to share, again, our questions. For those of you that are joining us via phone, I will read them again. What are challenges, obstacles in developing and implementing native language programs? We'll start there. Does anyone have anything to share on that? Maybe perhaps you've thought of this and adding it to your grant as part of your SAP, part of your grant activities. Has there been any challenges? Anyone like to share? John, do you see anyone? I'm kind of going through.
I don't yet.
Yeah. Okay. And so I'll go on to the next one that we have here is, why are there not more language program strategies on the SAPs? And
we would really like to get some responses from the project staff and the program staff. You know, what do you think? Why aren't there more language strategies that you're utilizing? Is it because they're too challenging to develop and implement, or what do you think? Why is that happening?
Yes, I had created a few questions when I was thinking about when we get to this activity here, John, and maybe to kind of spark some of those thoughts as I know in my Haudenosaunee communities in both Ontario, New York region that we have a lot of language land-based learning schools, cultural schools, and they're well into over their 20 years of existence of being an immersion school. And I want to know, has anyone, any of our Native Connections grantees thought about creating MOUs with their land-based language cultural schools, immersion schools, and helping them implement language in their programming that have those, if you have that accessible to you in your community?
And I would like to invite Patrick to speak on that as well. You know, I know he's done a lot of language programs in the Browning public schools, in the public school, but there's also an immersion school there on the reservation. So did you want to say anything about that, Pat?
What was the question again? Is it the second one or?
Yeah, or yeah, the first question.
Well, the first question. A lot of the challenges and the obstacles that we ran into was just people, you know, just a lot of gray area, gray matter and whatnot, you know, a lot of times people really depend on data, you know, they really depend on that to back as proof and whatnot, you know. So the proof and the data that we have is, you know, just the success in our students and how they are living their daily life and whatnot. And so with the immersion programs and whatnot, because of that data and everything, our immersion programs in Browning are now thriving. You know, parents want more. There's a waiting list for each immersion classroom, and we have immersion classrooms from kindergarten up to 6th grade now. They're trying to figure out the middle school and high school levels and how, you know, how students they rotate throughout the daytime to different subject areas and studies. And so just being able to work around stuff like that, you know, there's a lot of challenges in gray area matter that we have to work through. But all in all, like I said before, our administrators, you know, they just don't know. And so there's like a lot of trauma behind that not knowing. And so because of that not knowing, they get scared and saying, well, go ahead. And so, like I said before, I kind of bullied my way, not really testing out or anything like that, but I just went in there and I took a chance and took a stance with my own immersion classroom and said, we need to implement more place-based learning activities. You know, there's knowledge outside the walls, you know, outside that classroom that needs to be harnessed. We need to go do more in order to really help our students to succeed with immersion. And a lot of times, like one of the administrators said, well, what is immersion? Immersion is just infusing, you know, 2 different world paradigms into your educational curriculum, you know, with the notion of, you know, helping our students to identify with them culturally, you know, indigenously, you know. And so being able to work past that, you know, and helping our administration buildings, our administrators to understand the importance and needs of immersion, you know. So if we can get past data and all of that, you know, all that gray area, gray matter, then you know, you just got to take a stance, you know, just put your chest up, you know, and just bully your way in there, I guess.
Thank you, Pat. Cree, you wanna
Sure, I can touch on that while everybody is writing in the chat. I'm sure it's a lot to type out, so I can talk while people are writing. So I see 2 kind of main challenges and obstacles. And the first is just kind of colonization and what happened with our speakers Maybe we don't have, some tribes that I've worked with through ANA, they just don't even have any first language speakers left, or the ones that are left are elderly, or, have health issues. And so that's a big challenge, is just, maybe they don't have a curriculum already, curriculums already developed or resources documented. So just the first one is essentially just the cultural resources. Do we even have that to work with and to implement? And the second kind of piggybacks off of what Patrick was talking about, in that we have a lot of burden of proof to really say that we know on an instinctual, intuitive level that our language and our culture is good for us, but how hard is it to prove, right, to these Eurocentric systems that say, here's our standards, here's what physical health means, oh, you're not doing that, all these red tape and constrictions. And that's why, when I talked today, a lot of what I talked about, I connected it to neurobiology, I connected it to epigenetics, and I provided that scientific Western evidence and say, here's your proof, because I've collected all that, gathered all that research over years, because that is the biggest challenge, is convincing these institutions, convincing these funders that our language and our culture is beneficial. And that it is actually, if we were to use our own culture, and not just translating, right? Not just translating a Western curriculum into our language. If we were to use our language and culture as modality, there's so many health benefits, so many, mental, physical, spiritual benefits to that. And so I've just spent so much time gathering that, because that is, I feel, is our biggest barrier, is having to constantly prove that. And I was actually going to say, Patrick, I'm so glad you're collecting that data, because the more, that's further proof, right? Like, this is working, this is good. Like, we know what we're doing. And I think that, the hundreds of years of boarding school, 3 generations in my family, of saying you're inferior, you're backwards, you're stupid, that's just wives' tales or hocus pocus, you know what I mean? And so we're able to come back around with all this research and say, actually, Western science is just now catching up to Indigenous knowledge. And so that's where, a lot of work that I do is just translating and saying, here's your proof. Let us do what we know needs to be done. And so I feel that that's the biggest challenge.
Thank you, Cree. We do have a comment in the chat there, John. Mary Horse Chief, if you'd like to come off mute, we'd like to hear what your response is.
Can I respond really quick? I just want to piggyback off of Cree.
Oh, sure, yes.
Sorry, I was talking, I had myself on mute.
Oh, no.
In my graduates program, one of my professors was going off the notion that we all learn the same. And a lot of the cohort that I was part of, we all just we're Native American, and they were just kind of like, held into themselves and saying, pretty much like, no, we're not. No, we don't learn the same. And so I stepped, pushed my chest out, and I said, Mr. Smaby, we don't learn the same. You may think that we all learn the same, but we don't. I said, let me decolonize you. Let me decolonize your whole mind frame and everything like that. And so I talked about immersion. I talked about how, the successes behind immersion and what it did for our students and whatnot, and how I taught from an Indigenous perspective. And so I told him, if I was to teach you about our bundle ways of life, in my ways of knowing, I have a doctorate's degree because of what I possess with my wife and I. Everything that we learn, everything that we're learning from that bundle is helping me to succeed in life. Now, if I was to explain all that and have you write paper after paper and whatnot, trying to transcribe everything that you learned, stemming from and wording everything that you learn from your background, how am I to understand that? And so he just sat back and he said, Pat, you're absolutely right. He said, we don't learn the same. He said, but you really made me, it opened my mind and my heart to know that when I teach Indigenous students from this point on, that their world paradigm stems from belief and subject matter far beyond than what I know. He said, forgive me of my ignorance. So just wanted to piggyback off Kriya on that.
Thank you, Patrick. Mary, are you available?
Yes, yes, thank you. First of all, I want to thank you guys for breaking all this down and talking about the science, you know, and because it reminded me of why language is so important as a part of each and every one of these activities that we do, you know. Actually, what we are fortunate here in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, northeastern Oklahoma, where we have trees, by the way. We have lots of trees.
Sorry, I didn't mean to say that in a negative way at all.
No, it's okay. And in western Oklahoma, we know they don't have a lot out there because, you know, it's desert. But anyway, there. But that just tells you, you know, how different it is here, just in one state, you know. But yeah, we're very fortunate that well, a lot of the activities that I do, culturally related, we're very fortunate that some of the teachers that I work with are all speakers. They speak Cherokee language. And so, and one in particular has an extensive knowledge of teaching the language too. So in grade school curriculums. So he has a lot of knowledge that way. So he knows how to bring it up as far as what's related to what we're doing, you know, and to get them to repeat it back several times, and then what it actually means. And I'm very fortunate. I don't speak myself, but we're very fortunate that we have folks that can relate in every single one of our activities, whatever we're doing as far as the cultural activities. They can relate the language back, and at least they can do some words. They can hear the stories, and it's not. We try to go with it organically too. We try not to do too much, because we have done that in the past where, you know, we put some signs up and have some words on it so people can learn from different parts. But as Patrick was talking about, you know, unless you get the full meaning behind it, you know, or utilize it, you know, it's not really, you're not really getting the bang for your buck, right? So we've tried to go at it a little more organically, and then what we get is the conversations back and forth too, and the stories that happen as we're doing the activities. So we're very fortunate here also that we have a immersion program that's been in existence for probably almost 20 years now. So they, and I'm not an expert on that program, but I do know that from speaking with community members and then working here for so long and everything that's happened with it, you know, we've got kids that have gone all the way through and graduated high school now. So what we were learning from in the beginning, there was a hope, you know, that these children, they started in pre-K, that they of course would learn how to speak, right? And they would get all the benefits from that. But we were going, from what I understand, they were going from the Hawaiian model, in that they were telling the parents that teaching a child to speak more than one language is going to benefit them in many, many ways, like what Cree was talking about and what Patrick was talking about. Teaching them, you know, aside from the, you know, getting their identity and the meaning behind the words and their own belonging and everything, you know, but it was going to help them with their intelligence level also later. There was going to be a little bit of a part in the process. Is going to be a little bit of a hiccup maybe, where they're going to have to learn English too, as well, as far as reading and writing, you know, and they left a lot of that up to the parents. but some of the parents, had to get tutors and stuff too. So, but once they got past that, which happened a little bit in grade school, once they got past that, the kids just kind of took off. So anyway, that's just been our experience here as far as our immersion program. And we have so many programs here, classes, how to learn the language and stuff, that I really haven't focused a lot of it on there, aside from just incorporating it into our activities. But I from hearing you guys talk, I really understand that we probably should put a little bit more importance on that, because you're right. And at the very least, point them in the direction and provide them with the resources they would need to be able to learn more, every single time. Because there are so many resources that they can utilize here, and why that would benefit them, and why it's so important. Because just as an example, one of my nieces, my husband's nieces, she grew up in a town not far from here, and she didn't know anything. She was never taught anything Cherokee. And she was talking to my husband and was asking him, where can I learn some of this stuff? I want to learn, how, what I don't have any idea what it's like to be Cherokee. And so he just basically told her, you need to go learn the language. If you learn the language, you will learn, what it's like to be Cherokee. And so she did. And she just graduated from the Master's Apprentice Program and is teaching now. So yes, that's a great success story, and it's probably a little extraordinary, but she has found herself, and maybe a little bit more than that, to be able to be that beacon, and also to be able to teach, So thank you for that reminder, Cree and Patrick and John, you guys, because we do emphasize resources as far as mental wellness and stuff also, but I think we need to, in addition to that, maybe even more importantly, emphasize the resources for language too. So I didn't want to type all that.
Thank you, Mary. Well, John, I think we might have to have a part 2.
Yeah, I think so too. I was going to say, Mary, that's an awesome closing story. Thank you so much. And we're out of time, but we're going to turn it over to BC to close for us. Thank you for joining us.
We appreciate you joining us today. And as you can see, we'll end on a bit of language here. My own tribal language, Pawnee, is there in Hidewe Tudahe, meaning thank you. So we look forward to you being a part of our upcoming webinars. We only have 3 more left. Part 3 of Healing from Historical Trauma. We're going to talk about self-determination and resilience on May 31st. And then Hunter will be leading a webinar on tribal history acquisition for healing, how we can heal when we know what our history is. And finally, sustainability. So we look forward to you joining us for those. And now I'm going to ask Cree if she could close for us. Cree?
Yes, absolutely. And just one quick comment. I actually do get to work with the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma's language program with Howard Payton and Ryan Mackey and Mr. Tom Belt, and I love it. Like, they're just a fun group. And so I appreciate, working with your tribe, and I love being down there with your trees. Anyways, I'll go ahead and close us off with a prayer in my language, Okanagan Salish. Why Kolanchutin Jakin says Mahage Nat Ultalikin limt Apanat Schal Dasli Kuyaya Kuchin he me hast wilhel he's Kailuchtet, he's Naxiluchtet, Uliati Skailuchel, he Tumhula Kala Tali kuch kolam hikos jamala hils lach de wilchul me chmischutel hul me hastis boostel hul me tchadn tem hitum hulauch limnum limtamentum hitum hulauch limtamentum hit milch limtamentum hits jamala ul putti kuala putti chmi stem an kolkweln tet putti chmi stem his kailuk chautet dul tali kukuch kwach dul limlum dul Mini I hoistamacha is chkotet chayayati skailu. Yeah, I don't know if I want to translate that. That's a lot. But thank you all for joining, and I'm so happy to that myself and Patrick could help you all in the work that you do, and I appreciate your open hearts and minds, and in the work that it's all healing work, and I'm so happy to see this going on and what we're doing for our communities. So name them.
Thank you, Cree, and thank you, Patrick and Cree both, and thank you all.
Thank you again, folks. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.